Okay. All right. So we spoke last week about the concept of a Megillah. We said, and we're going to just do a quick review. A Megillah doesn't teach halacha. Typically, Chumash, you can take halacha out of it, but Megillah, we never take halacha out of it. In fact, if it appears as if halacha is being suggested in a Megillah, it means we got to go back at it and look at it differently. So that's A. So what does a Megillah do? A Megillah, like Megilat Ruth, which we're studying as a ramp up to Shavuot, Megilat Ruth is teaching Meser Chaim. It's teaching life values, life perspectives. Hey, Florence. Great to see you, honey. Hi, Al. Wow, what a beautiful showing tonight. So a Megillah is teaching Meser Chaim. It's teaching life perspectives. So being that that's the way we approach a Megillah, we look very carefully at stylistic things, at the sentence structure, at language, at certain words that are called out. We mentioned a little bit of that last time, and we're going to continue along those lines. So when it comes to a Megillah, language is huge. When it comes to a Megillah, style is very important. Certain words, if we see them being highlighted over and again, we got to jump on them. And the idea being that all of what's written in each area of Torah is meant to be looked at collectively as one. So, for example, we say that the last parasha, V'zot Beracha, in the Chamisha Chumshei Torah, and the first parasha, Bereshit, are absolutely tied together. One Zota Beracha flows right back into Bereshit, meaning that it's one collective work. So the 5 books of the Chumash, hey Sari, how are you? Hi Joy. The 5 books of the Chumash are one collective work. The books of the Nevi'im should be looked at as a collective work as well. So it forces a different approach, a different scope. The Ketubim, the different Megillot, and the Shir Hashirim should be looked upon as one work as well, which means that we can comfortably and easily flow from Megillat Esther to Kohelet to Echa to Megillat Ruth. It's a very exciting way to study. I'm not looking at Megillat Ruth as a standalone piece. I'm looking at it in the context of the third tranche of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's communication with us, called Ketubim. And based on that, I understand. I understand how. Sorry. Based on that, I study it. Good. Okay. So the Ruth, like we mentioned a little bit about her last week, a lot about her actually. We said that she was somewhat like Abraham Avinu. She identifies. I don't know where. Just anybody who has some noise, just kill it. She identifies Hakadosh Baruch Hu early on. We talked about the words that she uses as she embraces Judaism and Hakadosh Baruch Hu, and we are going to build on her actions with Boaz as they come to this total picture that we need to be thinking about, which is, hey, Jeanette, how are you?
Hi, Ricky.
Good to see you.
You too.
Picture as follows, that we need a ger, we need a convert to complete this process of the Geulah. There's simply no way that the Jewish people can come home to the land of Israel and to Mashiach without the insertion of a ger, of a convert. It's a remarkable thing in Torah that the ger is a tipping point for us. We talked about that a few classes back, and we also talked about something that Sari wasn't completely comfortable with, but we're going to actually talk about it some more tonight, which is this notion of Gilgul. So, headline. Megillah is about a way of looking at life. Top down. The Megillah should be looked at in the context of other Megillot. So don't be afraid to compare Megilat Ruth to Megilat Esther to Echad to Shir Shirim. It should be done that way, and have an open mind to that. Next, the concept of ger is essential, of a convert, is essential for the completion of the Jewish people, the Jewish experience. In fact, our rabbis say from the Kabbalistic side that there were certain forces, certain levels of energy that Adam Harishon had within him. When he dies, those elements of energy are dispersed. Moshe Rabbeinu reclaims a good portion of them and therefore is able to give us the Torah. And this ger, this convert, brings the balance. That's how important he or she is. Good. And the last concept as an introduction for tonight is this notion of Gilgul, which means that each person has a lineage. She has a continuance. There was a plan and possibility for that person many, many lifetimes ago, could be centuries ago, and the person will fulfill that possibility to the greatest extent that he or she can in each lifetime, moving towards an ultimate completion of the human being, as there is an ultimate completion to the Jewish people. One quick second, Sari, I got you, 1 second. So again, Reuven could have started things 1,000 years ago, maybe 2,000. He makes his effort. Maybe he marries.
Is it the same thing? Do I have to
Hi,
pay
Carol.
more or what?
Carol, hi, Carol. Welcome back. Good to hear you.
Okay, good.
Great.
So now what do I have in credits there?
Carol,
Could you
just
tell me?
mute. Carol, okay, great. Sorry about that, guys. Okay, so Reuven could have married Sarah 1,000 years ago, and
I
together
do,
they
right? See, that's
achieved.
what I wanted to use at the time. And I couldn't, when I was booking my flat, I couldn't use it.
Together they achieve a certain amount of things, and then after 120 years, Reuven passes along, Sarah passes along, and they achieved a certain amount of what their capacity is in this life, in life in general. Depending on how they live their life, they come back and have an opportunity to build further. Now, you may or may not love that perspective, and Sari, I want to hear your thoughts. You may or may not love it, but it's essential to the story of Ruth and Boaz. And it's worth giving serious consideration, if for nothing else, but to understand the very strong rabbinic approach to this story of Ruth and Boaz. Yes, Sari.
So that idea of reincarnation, is it midrash or like who?
No?
Yeah, no, it's.
If you want to park it somewhere, I guess you would park it more on the Kabbalistic side of things. So let me tell you this one and tell me what you guys think, how you feel about it. So we need to, in order to understand it, I think it's exciting. We may or may not accept it in the end, but the idea is exciting and it's challenging. We know the story of Lot, right? Lot is the carbon copy of Abraham. They say that they were so much alike, they looked alike. Lot ends up feeling he has to build his life independently, goes to a place that's the antithesis of him, Sodom, the antithesis of Abraham. And in the end, when Sodom is destroyed, Lot is saved, right? We all know the story. Now, what happens when Lot is saved? Who remembers what happens? Lot is saved with who? And what happens at that point?
With his daughters.
Beautiful, Flora, with his daughters. And what happens?
They sleep with him. They think that the world is finished. There's nobody else, that they want to reproduce the world. So they get him drunk, and the oldest one sleeps with him, and then the second one the second night. And they have children.
And they have children. They think the world was destroyed. Not only Sodom and Amorah are destroyed, and the entire valley, that area, but they think everything is destroyed. How would they think otherwise? The truth, what they think makes a lot of sense.
That's what they saw.
Yeah, exactly. The older daughter has relations with him, and the younger daughter has relations with him. And from those relations, two major nations emerge, Ammon and Moab. Now, our rabbis say the following: Lot is the start of the process. His daughter, the mother of Moab, is the start of the process. They get together in a very lowly way. It's a daughter having relations with her father. They get together in a very lowly way, but they get together for a great purpose, for a life sacrificing purpose. The daughters who gave themselves to their father would never be with anybody else and never were. And if it was ultimately discovered that the world wasn't destroyed, which it wasn't, their lives were ruined because no one would be with someone who had a baby from her father. So the Mesirut Nefesh, the self-sacrifice of these women is very noteworthy. So our rabbis start and say, Lot is a giant. He's the Dupanim. He's the parallel of Avraham Avinu. He goes in a direction that's antithetical to him, but he preserves who he is. His daughters have a great level of self-sacrifice. They dedicate their lives, they ruin their lives to propagate the planet. Now, the way they do it, our rabbis call ziborit, with a zayin, which means they were with their father, and that cohabitation was a lowly cohabitation. Okay, step one in this Gilgul possibility. Our rabbis say that Lot is Megalgel to become Yehuda, and that his daughter, the mother of Moab, is Megalgelet to become Tamar.
Oh,
What's
wow.
the story of Yehuda and Tamar? Who remembers that story?
That Yehuda saw her on the road. She was on the
Right.
road and he didn't realize who she was.
Right. But who is she to Yehuda to begin with, Sarah? You're right. Who is she to?
Daughter-in-law. His
His
daughter.
daughter-in-law, yeah.
She's his daughter-in-law. Perfect. Hey, Al, she's his daughter-in-law. Right. Why is she alone?
Her
Because-
husband died, or two husbands died.
Two of her
Right.
husbands, Lo Aleinu, died because of their sins before HaKadosh Baruch Hu,
Right.
having nothing to do with her.
And
But her
Yehuda does-
father-in-law grows concerned that she's Isha Katlanit, the halachic term, which is that she's like a widow bride. You know, she murders off her husbands, and he doesn't give her to his third son. After waiting along for many years for this third son to grow up, she realizes that her father-in-law is not going to keep his side of the bargain. She poses as a harlot. She convinces him to have relations with her, and they have relations, and from them, two babies are born. Our rabbis say that Yehuda, the son of Yaakov, was originally Lot,
All right.
and Tamar was originally the daughter of Moab. Now, again, you could buy it or not, but run with it for another few minutes because it's a lot of fun. It's an exciting possibility. And the connecting dots are fun. So now we go from a lowly collaboration between father and daughter. But remember, older man, younger daughter, right? Common theme, drop down, 1,000 years later. Older man, Yehuda, younger lady. Our rabbis say that that cohabitation was not lowly like the first one was between Lot and his daughter, but we're going to call it Benonit. Benonit. Mid. He didn't take her properly like a wife, but he ultimately has children with her. And those children are the great, great, great grandfathers of Mashiach, right? The Shevet Yehuda. Good. Drop down. Our rabbis say the following. Who's the Gilgul of Yehuda? What would you say?
Boaz. Boaz.
There you go. Beauty. Boaz is the Gilgul of Yehuda. Who's the Gilgul of Tamar?
Ruth.
Ruth.
Ruth. Oh, wow. So now we have Generation A, B, C. What happens the third time around? How does
It's-
Boaz take Ruth?
Properly.
Hey,
Properly.
beautiful. He takes her properly. He takes her with kiddushin. He takes her with chuppah. He takes her with sheva berachot. In fact, everybody remember that beracha that the rabbis say on the chuppah when after the sheva berachot, that this young bride should build like Sarah and Rivka and should build a house in Israel and so on. That was said the first time with Ruth. The first time it was said was with Ruth. And what is this type of connection called in halachic terms? Idit, which means premier or premium. So you have Lot and his daughter. Not a great story. Ziburit, not too classy with a Zion. Drop down to Yehuda and Tamar, Gilgul, getting a little better. Also now forming the Shevet that's going to build Mashiach. Drop down to Boaz and Ruth. Just happens to be that the acronym of the name Boaz is Benonit, Idit, and Ziburit, the three levels of how each of these women was taken and made a wife. And finally, with that last one, we have the absolute imprint of Mashiach. So this means, and by the way, 3 out of 3, elder man, younger lady, each case, strange circumstances. So the first thing to keep in mind in terms of Boaz and Ruth, and whether you're on it or not, either way is great, but you may want to trace it back to Lot and his daughter, from whom comes Moab, which is where Ruth is from. And in that sense, you see this vision that HaKadosh Baruch Hu articulates that we can see manifest over time. And it seems then that the ger that we need to make ourselves whole can only come from Moab. And somehow Boaz, and by the way, remember we said that with the Megillah, it's all about the Meser, it's all about the lesson. That ain't his name.
What's his
That's
name?
a name applied to him. His real name is Amotz, not Boaz. And like Machlon, like Kilion, like Naomi, like every one of them, that is not his name. Those letters are chosen to describe him, to suggest areas of learning for us. Okay, thoughts, questions?
Can I ask you a question? Could we suggest that Hagar could be Hager, and that's why we ended up Gerim in Eretz
Could be.
Mitzrayim for a
It could
Gilgul,
be.
to
It
make
could be.
whole for what we did to her.
It's a great one, Sarah. That's a great one. We have to look at the Hagar story from this vantage point. That's right. I never looked at it that way, but I think it would be great.
It has the same letters, Hager,
It has
Hagar.
the same letters, right? Okay, Sari, you're frowning. What do you say? Yes, no? Huh? You're muted.
I'm not frowning.
You're okay with it? You'll consider it?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Who else? Any thoughts, questions so far? Rachel? What do you say? Anything?
I have two little questions. Why do we need a convert?
Okay,
Why is that part of our redemption?
beautiful. So there are two sides to it. So it goes back to a question that we actually touched on. We didn't go this far with it a couple of weeks ago when we talked about the takeaways from Pesach. And one of the things we said was that Galut, that the diaspora is not a punishment that the Jewish people have to endure. The Jewish people being in the diaspora is an opportunity for the Jewish people to enrich the people of the world and to be enriched by them. And of course, challenged by that as well. So when Hakadosh Baruch Hu tells Abraham Avinu, when there were no Jewish people, and there certainly wasn't an opportunity for the Jewish people to sin, that his children would be slaves in Egypt for 400 years, our rabbis knock on the door and say, wait a second, all this time everybody said that Galut was a punishment. It can't be, because there was nothing to get punished for. Therefore, if we have to be in Galut, and we have to touch other people's lives, and they have to touch ours, it means there's something incomplete about us uniquely. We can't get it done. And there's certain sensibilities that a ger can only bring that we can't appreciate. Now, one of the things we mentioned last week is that someone who is mitzuvev oseh, who has an obligation to keep the mitzvot, gets a greater reward for keeping them than someone who just does them because he or she likes to. Hey, Erwin, this does them because he or she likes to. But we saw, great, good to see you. We saw that Ruth makes this absolutely unequivocal commitment to the Jewish people. And we said, one of the takeaways from last week's class, some of us actually talked about it afterwards, and the feedback was fantastic. I appreciate it very much. We said that we have to model ourselves based on Ruth and her embrace of Torah and her commitment to the Jewish people. That's really greater than assumed or expected from someone who just was born into it. So I can't say that I fully understand what the ger brings, but I can say that what we've seen from the description of Ruth as the epitome of the ger is a love and an interest in being part of the Jewish people that's even greater than we can express. There was a lady, what was that lady's name? Elchana Johnson. I'll tell you the story quickly. You remember the Gulf War, I think it was the second Gulf War, when they were launching missiles on Israel. The war had nothing to do with Israel, but the Arabs just used it as an excuse to launch missiles and throw missiles at Tel Aviv. There was a non-Jewish lady, her name was, not her real name, her last name was Johnson. I don't, maybe call her Norma or something Johnson. She was in Israel during the time when the missiles were falling. She saw the resolve of the Jewish people. She couldn't believe it. She was shocked by it, how people with two-room apartments were taking families with 5 children into those apartments. She saw the resilience. She saw the optimism, and she decides to convert to Judaism. And then her name was changed to Hannah Johnson. She lived in Shiloh until the end of her life. She had a very difficult life, because she essentially disconnected from her family, and she lived alone. And I would say the jury is out on her decision. But what she did for the people of Shiloh was absolutely unparalleled. Because even those people who have made great sacrifices to the Jewish people couldn't imagine someone coming from the outside to choose to make those sacrifices. So Rachel, a long answer to a short question. I think what a ger does for us, I'm going to use simple terms, but I want to qualify them and say it's not right. They just build this sense of awe and appreciation in coming from the outside and voluntarily embracing all of those issues that Judaism brings with it that are hard. So maybe what we need the ger to do is to wake us up, is to make us more excited about who we are, is to make us more appreciative about who we are. I'm sure it's much more than that, but that's what I could offer now. Thoughts? Second question?
I have a question.
Mhm.
Was Tamar Jewish? Like, where'd she come from? What was her origin?
Who?
Tamar.
Tamar was Jewish, yeah. Tamar was Jewish.
So I guess my question is like going back to Gilgul, like is a Jew reincarnated as a Jew? You know, that's why I asked if Tamar was Jewish, to see
That's
if,
it's a fantastic question. So we know that there are many neshamot in the world. We don't know how many, but there are many, it's probably millions at this point, of Jewish neshamot, of people who are actually Jewish, who are living the lives of non-Jews. And somehow those neshamot, those Jewish neshamot, get scattered among the nations and ultimately make their way back. And that's exact, and it's a very, and your question is right on target, Sari. How could someone, she's a Moabiyah, right? She's the mother of Moab, is Megilat into Tamar, who is Jewish, and is reincarnated in a non-Jew. What does that mean? Truth is, we don't know what it means, but what we do know is, and what the accepted perspective is that there are Jewish neshamot in non-Jewish bodies, so to speak, in non-Jewish lives that will ultimately make their way back to Judaism. So that's you can you say that she was reincarnated as a non-Jew? No. You would say that she's reincarnated into a life experience of a non-Jew with the hope that she will make her way back, or her children will, or her grandchildren will. You know, there are hundreds of stories in South America about non-Jews doing very Jewish things. We have the Spanish Inquisition and so on, when hundreds of thousands of people were forced to either give up their Judaism, run away, or live under guise of being goyim.
called
Now
Morano.
it's right, Moranos, perfect. Now it's 500 years later, and we're hearing not one story, but hundreds of stories of people whose grandmothers lit candles on a Friday afternoon, and people who didn't eat bread for 2 or 3 weeks during the springtime, and on and on. We're hearing these things, and these are Jewish neshamot living non-Jewish existences at this point, playing this huge, multifaceted role to ultimately help Mashiach come to a perfected world. Okay? So far, so
Question.
good? Erwin?
So out of curiosity, I don't know if there's an answer, but I'm fishing for it. Maybe you have it. Why would Hashem use a non-Jew as a vehicle back for reincarnation? What would be the purpose? Why didn't he go like through a Jew? Why didn't he go
So you're echoing Rachel's
take a
question.
left turn and
Yeah, you're
go?
echoing Rachel's question, and I think we don't have an absolute answer, but I think
Right.
the answer is in the language and the commitment that Ruth HaMoabiyah says when she makes her claim to Judaism. Her mother-in-law had, lo alenu, a horrific life. She lost everything, but somehow this young lady saw a value system that she was ready to sacrifice her life for. They say she was a Moabite princess, so she could write her own script. But somehow she's touched by Judaism to the point where she says, where you walk, I walk, whom you'll be with, I'll be with, where you end up your life, I'll end up, because I know that your lifestyle doesn't end in this world, but there's another dimension to it. So maybe, and I think it's more complex than this, but maybe we need that outside shot to move us, not maybe, we need that outside shot. Maybe it's from a perspective of appreciation to complete us, that we will be humbled, inspired, and transformed by these people who take it on but don't have to. And that's the only way that will bring Mashiach, because without them, we won't get to the level that we have to get to bring Mashiach.
Ricky, don't we have in our Chumashim, interpretation from Onkelos, and Onkelos was not a Jewish person.
That's correct. The most
Well,
ancient and authentic interpretation we have is from a ger. That's
from a
right.
So
That's
making
right.
interpretation is like something we couldn't come up with as a Jew.
That's right.
And
Yeah,
they actually put
yeah.
it in Chumash
Yeah,
on
yeah.
your-
And being that we realize how empowered we are and how unique our relationship is with God, it's amazing to think that we can't complete the story, but we absolutely can't. So let's move to the next step. Remember, we said in the Megillah that we have to pay attention to language. We have to pay attention to names. So we know that Boaz is a name that's applied to him. And because maybe he represents the third and final stop in this Gilgulim that had to happen in order to ultimately set up the pathway for King David, for some of the great Nevi'im, and for Mashiach. Now, we say that Boaz came from where? Sorry, Serene, you want to say something? Serene, you want to say something? Can't hear you. Okay. Serene, you're on mute. Okay. So we say that Boaz came from where? Where does Boaz come from? What town? Famous town in current modern Israeli news. What town does Boaz come from? He comes from a place called Beit Lechem. Now, remember, do we have to take the Megillah as factual? No, because we want to glean the messages. We want to go from the surface story to the meta messages. So our rabbis say, did Boaz come from Beit Lechem? Maybe, but maybe not. Maybe Beit Lechem, the house of Lechem, is meant to give us another insight on Boaz. In order to do that, we need to look at a fabulous perek in Pirkei Avot, the sixth perek in Pirkei Avot, where our rabbis say the following: the person who is a person of Torah has within him 49 or her ma'alot, 49 beautiful elements in a person who has Torah. What are some of those elements? He's kind. He understands his place. He's happy with what he has, or she. He limits his words. He believes in less is more. He loves people and is loved. He loves to do the right thing. He loves to be rebuked. He runs away from honor, and so on and so on. So the rabbis say that the person who has Torah has earned for himself 49 attributes. And again, happy, cares for people, loves intellectual exercise, doesn't sleep a lot, doesn't talk a lot, cares a lot about respecting others, has a lev tov, or a happy heart. Okay. Our rabbis also say in the same perek of Pirkei Avot, in this case referencing two Gemarot, that the person who has Malchut has 30 attributes. In the case of the king, what are the 30 attributes? Well, the 30 attributes are power, the ability to make an autocratic decision, wealth that he can take, that he can get on his own, being above the law, not having to be a witness, not having to do hadithah, not having to marry a shifcha, so on and so on. So our rabbis say that Boaz mi Bet Lechem, we don't know if he came from Bethlehem or not, but the reference of Bet Lechem is the house of Malchut, of kingship, and of Torah. Lamed, the 30 attributes of a king, and the 49 attributes of a Talmid Chacham. Nice. Now, why is that important? Why would that be important? Why would it be important to say that Boaz comes from a place of Malchut and comes from a place of Torah? Why is that important? What does he do?
He's the leader of the
He
nation.
takes everything together.
He what?
He's the leader of the nation, and he has to set an example for the people.
Beautiful. He has to set the example for the people. And what is the great decision that he uniquely has the courage to make? What is his decision? What does he bring his Beit Din to do that enables him to marry the lady that he is sure is the ger needed to complete the Jewish people and to set the stage for Mashiach? What does Boaz have to do?
Change the law. It's to change the
Beautiful,
law.
Serene. He changes the law, or he interprets the law. What
was
law
the
does
law?
he interpret?
He
Which one?
interprets.
What was the
Interprets more
original?
than change it.
Which one?
He interprets more than change it.
He
Interprets the law. They didn't change it.
He didn't change it, he interprets it. Exactly. What law does he interpret?
That a Moabite is not.
Can't marry a Moab.
Beautiful. Lo yavo Moavi or Ammoni, a Moabite or an Ammonite can't come within the Jewish people for X number of generations. He says Moavi and not Moaviyah, Ammoni and not Ammoniyah, meaning that we can't bring the males in because they were the ones who sinned against the Jewish people as they were exiting the desert, but we can bring the females in. Now, who is he to move his Beit Din to this interpretation? That's a gigantic interpretation. And by the way, our rabbis affirm it. In order for us to value what he did and to have confidence in it and to validate Ruth as the mother ultimately of Mashiach, we have to know that Boaz may or may not have lived in Beit Lechem, but he was a person who was the shofet, who at that point in time was the king, de facto king of the Jewish people. And not only was he king, because if he was king, wouldn't have meant anything. A king can't interpret the law, to Flora's point. Exactly well said. A king can't interpret the law, but a Talmid Chacham can interpret the law. And a king as a shofet can drive that interpretation. So in order to accept what Boaz did and to run with it and to understand the greatness and his courage, we have to understand that he's from Beit Lechem, that he's a man who achieved two giant achievements. One, he earned the respect of a king, but he's better than a king because a king gets it through lineage. He earned it. He earned being the head of the Jewish people. And number two, he has the Torah. Now, you guys tell me. There's one other thing that Boaz does that's a little bit of a shocker, that the only way he can do it is because he had these great attributes. What does he do? Anybody remember how he greets the people in the field? Anybody remember how he greets them?
I think he asked
Hashem imachem.
God's right.
What,
Hashem
Micha?
with you. Is Hashem
What
with
is it?
you?
Yeah, he says, Ammonai is with you. Hashem imachem. And then the rabbis go back and forth on whether they answered him Yivarecha Hashem, or he further says Yivarecha Hashem. Now, what's the problem with that?
He knows Hashem's name.
Beautiful. He may have said God's name in vain.
Wow.
Our rabbis are very troubled by that. And there's a lot of different mifashim on it. Maybe he did the wrong thing, some of the rabbis say. The rabbis that I've seen that I think approach it the most rigorously say that the Megillah starts off Vayhi bimei shefot hashofetim.
Yeah.
That it was a time when the judges were being judged, meaning there was a halachic lawlessness in the Jewish people. People were far away from Judaism. That may be why there was the Ra'av, the famine on the land of Israel. So what does Boaz do? He wants to call out a reconnectedness to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and he makes the case and he stakes the claim of saying Yevarecha Hashem, even though you might say that he was saying God's name in vain. But as we said last class, this Megillah is supposed to be the bookend to Megilat Esther, where Megilat Esther never mentioned God's name. And as we said, the only one who refers to God is the wife of Haman HaRasha. Over here, God's name is constantly being put out, constantly, over and over and over and over and over. Why? Because our rabbis say that Boaz had to bring it back. Now, how dare Boaz bring it back? Who is he? And that goes back to the perspective of Boaz mibet lechem. Boaz came from a place where he had the leadership position in the people earned by him, and he had the Torah knowledge. Good. Thoughts, Bobby?
Yeah, hi, Ricky. I guess I'm thinking in like 2021 ahead, but did he get any pushback from the community because he wanted to marry this girl? Like, did anyone think, oh, he's doing it because he wants to marry her for personal reasons?
Beautiful. It's a beautiful question. And our rabbis spend a good amount of time on that. And they say that the midrashim are abundant that say that Lo Alenu, he lost his wife immediately before Naomi and Ruth appear back on the scene. They say that it's possible that the day they came back was her funeral, Lo Alenu. And then our rabbis say, he was a man of great power and could get whatever and great wealth and could get whatever he wanted. So why didn't he take her right away? He was alone. In those days, men didn't stay alone for very long at all. And he found her attractive. It seems like he found her attractive when he asked the other people working in his fields, who was she? So really, he was single and he could have taken her right away. Our rabbis say that he goes through the whole process, which probably took about 3 months, the whole harvest period for the grain in order to raise himself above any doubt that he was doing the wrong thing. He makes it a point to telling everybody around him who worked for him about her virtues. He then has the opportunity to be with her in the field at night and doesn't. He has the opportunity to bypass the closer cousin and doesn't, because he wants to do 2 things, our rabbi suggests. A, he recognizes somehow, and I'm going to read you the Pesukim in a minute and we'll wrap it up with that. He recognizes somehow that she is the ger. Somehow he recognized it. And she recognized that he was her savior. Somehow she recognized it. In order for him to be above reproach, to your question, and be able to take the position that he now, coming from Shevet Yehudah, he came from the tribe of Yehudah. He was a cousin of Elimelech, the aristocracy of the tribe of Yehudah. In order for him to take the position that he is going to establish the lineage of King David with this lady, he has to be above reproach. He has to do it in a very patient manner. He has to make sure that the closer of kin is not ready to do it. And only then can he marry her.
But isn't there a law, Ricky? Isn't there a Jewish law that says that you have to marry your sister-in-law?
You have to do yibum. Yes.
So there was a
But
law.
who does it? The closest relative. In this case, the closest relative.
On her.
Didn't want it.
But didn't want it.
Right. He didn't want it because he was afraid that she was a Moabite. Now, so the question comes up, did he get dealt a fair hand? Because he doesn't have Boaz's power to proclaim Moabite in the female is okay. But our rabbis don't judge him well. They don't judge him well. You would think that he would be judged as a victim, but he's not. He's judged as someone who lost the opportunity, who should have researched it, who could have found out where the Beit Din of Boaz was going on this issue, but doesn't.
How would he know that?
Yeah, how did they
Huh?
know that? How would they know that?
Yeah.
Yeah, it seems,
If he took 3 months, maybe, in those 3 months, that's what he was doing.
it could be. It could be. It seems that when Ruth comes back with Naomi, now the Beit Din is faced with that question, and they have to deal with it. What do we do with her? She proclaimed her commitment to the Jewish people. She's with the princess, the former queen of the Jewish people, right? They were the Panasei Hador and the Chachamim of the generation. Her husband and sons were the financial wherewithal and the intellectual leadership of the generation before they left. So they can't discount the fact that Naomi brought her back. They can't just say, oh, she's a goy, leave her alone, who cares? The fact that Naomi brings her back, the fact that she makes the proclamation she makes, which somehow become public, the fact that she carries herself as she does, forces the court of Boaz to take up the case of how do we interpret the law against the Moabites? Is it strictly against the men or is it against the women as well? Okay, now, last piece. There are 2 psukim that are fabulous. They when Boaz and Ruth meet, after Boaz watches her and sees her midot, he says, Yishalem Elokim pa'alech. Elokim should pay you, he should reward you for your actions. Utihi maskortech shelema mi'im Hashem. And your earnings should be absolutely perfect and complete from God. Elokei Yisrael, the God of Israel. Asher bat lechasot tachat knafav, who you came to take refuge under his wings. What do our rabbis say here? They say, look at the language. He says, Yishalem Elokim, not Yishalem Amonai, which means what, Sarah?
That's the God of everybody, Elokim. And
Right.
Vavke is the God of the Jewish people.
Beautiful. And great. And he says Yishalem Elokim. When the term Elokim is used, it references a male offspring. For whatever reason, Elokim is tied to male offspring, and Ammonai is tied to female offspring. So our rabbis say the following. What was Boaz saying to Ruth? He says, listen, Ruth, La'alenu, I know you were Akara. I know you were barren when you were married to Machlon. I know you were barren. I know you couldn't have a baby. You're going to be with me. You're going to have a baby, and the baby is going to go be a male child. Yishalem Elokim pa'alech. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to pay you for your efforts, for your sacrifice. And what is he going to do, Ruth? He's going to give you life. You have no life because you have no children. You can only build your life by having a child. And what is HaKadosh Baruch Hu going to do for you? He's not going to simply build you with a female child. He's going to give you the gold. He's going to give you a male child. And what does Ruth tell him? It's awesome. But Tomer, she answers him, Emsachen be'enecha. I will find favor in your eyes. The word favor, when used in this context, references what? The birth of a baby boy. She was on it. Adoni, Ki nichamtani v'ki dibarta alev shifchatecha. You consoled me, and you spoke on the heart of your maidservant. But she right away calls him out and pulls him into line, and she says, "Lo eheyeh ke'achat shifchatecha." Yeah, you're right. We're meant to be together. We have a long story to perpetuate. Tamar, the daughter of Lot. We have a long story to perpetuate, but I want to make it clear to you, Mr. Boaz. You're the king, you're the Torah giant, I'm the lonely convert, but you're going to marry me on equal terms. You will never marry me the way Lot's daughter took her father, where that wasn't a marriage, but it brought forth a child, or the way Yehudah took Tamar, where that wasn't a marriage. In the first case, he was disrespected. In the second case, she was disrespected. When you take me, Ruth says, I know who I am. And you're going to take me like a full-fledged Jewish wife. Va'anochi. Sarah, you may remember this from the old days. When we see the word anochi, what does it mean?
Hashem's intervening.
Good, but what else does it mean as opposed to ani? What does the term anochi mean?
10 Commandments? I don't know.
Yeah, David. All right, David, come on. Anochi. When it's said in the 10 Commandments, you're right. When it's said in the 10 Commandments,
Oh, wow.
why does HaKadosh Baruch Hu use the word anochi and not ani? Erwin, you're much too quiet tonight. Anochi, come on.
He's intervening.
Huh? Anochi means my essence, my entirety, everything about me. Where do we see that before the 10 Commandments? We'll wrap up with this in 2-3 minutes. Where do we see that before the 10 Commandments? Come on. Who's the Anochi lady? Bobby, who's the Anochi lady? Do you remember?
Give us a hint.
Okay. She's one of the matriarchs. How's that for a hint?
I think Rivka, is it Rivka?
Beauty, Rivka, beautiful, Serene. Rivka. When does she say Anochi?
She says, me anochi, if I don't have a child, who am I? Right?
Beautiful. She says, if my children, she's actually in the second part of the prayer.
Right.
She said, after she's told that she has 2 children who are fighting to destroy each other, she says,
Yes.
if that's my lot, what am I? Mi anochi. That's a life. God, that's what you held out for me. That's my essence. That's my golal. That's my a thing in the world. That's my possibility in the world. So when the term anochi is used, again, it's all about language and names. It's a Megillah. So when the term anochi is used, when she says ve'anochi lo eheyeh ke'echad shifchotecha. Listen, Mr. Boaz, you're the king, you're the Torah scholar, you got it all, I got nothing right now. But if you come into this thing, my essence is to be the mother of greatness, and you are going to come into my life on those terms or not at all. Now, final point. When do we know that Boaz fully gets it? Come on, Rachel, when do we know he fully gets it? What does he do after he meets her in the field at night and doesn't take her? What does he do? What does
He
he
gives
do,
her food?
Sarah?
Gives her food?
Yeah, beauty, Serene. What does he give her? Come on, we'll wrap up with it. Huh? What does he
I think
give
he
her?
gives food and then extra for his mother, for Naomi, no?
What he does? What does he give her? Does he she's a woman. Does he load her up with the sack of wheat? Or what does he give her? Elle, what does he give her, honey? You remember?
Does he leave it in the field?
No, Jeanette, she brings it. He
Oh.
takes her. Yeah, remember what he does? He takes her covering, her blanket, right? And he puts 6 pieces of wheat on it. He puts 1 at the top, then 2, then 2, then 1. And what is he referencing to her in that case? That they will have a child. From that child, David HaMelech and 3 other giants will come. Mishael, Hananiah, and so on. 3 giant prophets will come, and the last one will be Mashiach. He puts one piece of seor, 2, 2, 1, to tell Naomi, I got it. I know who you are, Naomi. I know who Ruth is. I know what's doing here. I understand where this all came from. And I know that we are going to risk everything to establish the most important thing in Jewish history, the future of Jewish history. And by the way, parenthetically, look at it for a minute. You have one piece of seor, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If you got a little bit creative, what would you draw out of that 6 pieces? Erwin, you got to come on
The
this one.
Star of David, no?
Huh?
The
The
Jewish
Star.
star.
I knew you'd get it. The Jewish star. That's right. That's
You drew it for
exactly
Yeah,
right.
Ricky, you gave me a freebie.
Oh, you've been goofing off a little bit. I'm not going to let you do that.
I'm a little tired tonight, so I needed a little Jewishness to get
You're
me
doing
on.
great. You're doing great. The Jewish star, our rabbis say that the Jewish star ultimately comes from this configuration. 1, 2, 2, 1, and we shape the star from this configuration. The star of who?
David.
The
David.
Star of David. So when we read the Megillah, it's a world. There's layers and layers of information. People say that the story of Megillat Ruth is about chesed. Okay, that's nice. Nice idea. But look at it more carefully. Look at the language. Look at the words. Connect the dots. Think about other Megillot. Think about other stories. Maybe stretch a little bit and embrace the Gilgul, the reincarnation idea. Even if you're not comfortable with that, be comfortable with the logic, with the philosophical mahalach, the philosophical process that it suggests. And then what do you see? You see the greatness of these 2 individuals, the greatness of Boaz and the greatness of Ruth and the greatness of Anochi and everything that inshallah will come from it. Good. Thoughts, questions? Any
So-
other?
Was Boaz a prophet?
So it's a very good question. I would say that he was,
Yeah.
that he certainly had prophetic ability. Now there's an ongoing conversation throughout Jewish history of, who's greater, the prophet or the chacham, and who knows more, and who can get more in touch with deep things, the prophet or the chacham. And it's an ongoing question. Could be that he was a prophet on some level, or it could be, which I think, I'm with you if you're suggesting that he might have been. I have a sense that he might have been as well, at least on some level. But our rabbis say that the Navi will never be as great as the Chacham. That the person who has a great depth of Torah will understand things even better than the Navi. So when you see his level of perception vis-a-vis Ruth, it could be that it was prophetic, but it could be that it was greater than prophetic, that it was based on Torah wisdom. Right. Right.
Wait, can I ask you another question?
Sure.
Could we go back to the reincarnation for a minute?
Yeah.
So with Lot and Yehuda, it was the women who instigated it. With Boaz, it wasn't, right? He was the one who went for Ruth. Am I understanding that right?
No.
I don't know.
No.
No?
Ruth chooses to go to Boaz's field. Her mother-in-law tells her to stay there, but she makes the first choice to be there. When her mother tells her to approach Boaz and to uncover his feet, so to speak, and to begin to build a relationship with him, she does, but she changes some of her mother's instruction. And she really becomes the leader in it. So you have to say that he, from his possession of great power, he courts her, so to speak, but she is only coming in on her terms. And coming from where she came, it's just remarkable that she had that sense of self and that sense of her destiny to know who she was and what she was capable of. I don't know if I answered your question. Did I answer your question or no?
Yeah, no, I think I understood it incorrectly. Yeah, okay.
Ricky, how old was Ruth at this time that she had a sense of self?
I don't know. So they were in Moab. They were in Moab for 10 years after her boys passed. 10 years after they passed, right? After her husband passed, I'm sorry. They were there for 10 years. After her husband passed, the boys get married, Machlon and Kilyon, and they take these non-Jewish wives. Then it says that they passed relatively quickly. So how old was she? I don't know, 30, 40? She was young, she was young. And Boaz, we know, was not young at all. He was not young at all. It's sort of a deja vu all over again. Lot not being young, Yehuda not being young, and now Boaz not being young.
But Boaz was older.
Yeah.
But Ricky, but with Tamar, she wasn't a convert, right? So it
No.
wasn't really, it's not really like a convert story
That's true.
throughout.
That's
So-
true. That goes back to Sari's question. And it goes to the question of, well, what does that mean? Is the neshama Jewish or not Jewish? How does that work?
Oh, you're saying it could go through, okay,
Right.
got it.
Yeah.
But Ricky, who tells somebody to go uncover a man's feet? Like, I don't understand what that means.
Yeah. I think what it meant in those terms, in those times, was to express affection and to express an openness to build a relationship.
Don't
I
say
think
hello, hi, this is who I am,
no, the higher this is who I am, you're right. That happened before. That happened in the exchange, one of the exchanges that I quoted. That happened before. He took notice of her the first day she comes to town, and he keeps his eye on her for the several weeks until they ultimately get together.
And he tells the people to leave.
And then
And he tells the people to keep their eyes on her as well.
and
Right?
then she just uncovers his feet. Like, it sounds very silly.
Yeah, I guess in our terms it probably does, but in those terms it was.
Yeah.
What, David? Your
I
wife
don't think-
never
I
uncovered
don't
your
think it
feet,
means
right?
that. I think it means
Nobody's spouse ever uncovered their feet on this class. That's probably true. Maybe we're missing something. I don't know.
it means something else.
So I can't tell you what it was exactly, but it was an expression of approach and maybe the beginnings of an endearment.
Right.
Yeah.
That's a nice explanation. Nice.
Yeah.
He was too old, they had no time to lose.
What's that, Flora?
He was very old, they had no time to lose.
Yeah, there you go. Okay.
Did
old.
Boaz die the next morning?
The Midrash says that he didn't live long thereafter, right?
Oh, no.
After the feed, he checked out.
No,
I
actually,
don't know.
married.
The Midrash does say, some even say he died the next morning,
Oh, that's
but
terrible.
clearly he didn't live long after that.
That's terrible. Oh, my God. Well, you really brought a lot of layers to this story, a lot of.
Yeah, a lot of layers,
So many ways
fun
to
stuff. And it's just exciting to go beyond the surface,
Yes,
go
it is.
in and dig a little bit. So,
It is. It really is.
great to see everybody. And
Very
any
good.
other
Thank
thoughts,
you.
questions? Any other questions, everybody? No?
Thank you.
Good?
Thank you.
Great. All
Thank
right.
you,
Thank you,
Ricky.
Ricky. Chazak Baruch.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
thanks, Ricky.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you, Ricky.
Ricky.
Chazak
Bye.
Baruch.
Bye, guys.
Chazak
Bye,
Baruch.
everyone.
Nice.
Thank
Laura,
you.
it's great to see you, Laura. I hope you feel better.
Same here, honey.
Yes,
Thank
yeah,
you,
me
everybody.
too.
Bye-bye.
Miss
Thank
you.
you. David, welcome back. Great to have you back.
All right.
Thank you.
Go.
Take care. Take care, Sonny.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, Joy. Thank you.
Bye.